The blood dripping from her split knuckles onto the saloon floor was the first thing Wade Carter noticed when he walked through those swinging doors in St. George, Utah, on a scorching afternoon in July of 1878. The woman standing in the center of the room had her fists still raised, her chest heaving with exertion, and three men lay sprawled at various angles around her like fallen dominoes. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins and hung in wild tangles around her face, and her dress, a simple cotton thing that had probably been blue once, was torn at the shoulder. But it was her hands that held Wade's attention. Even from across the room, he could see the fresh cuts joining what looked like dozens of old scars crisscrossing her knuckles and the backs of her hands. "Someone want to tell me what happened here?" Wade asked, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. The bartender, a portly man with sweat staining his shirt, nearly jumped out of his skin. "Marshal Carter, thank God you are here. Those three started trouble with Miss Garrison. Said some things no lady should have to hear. She asked them to leave her be, but they would not listen. One of them grabbed her arm and, well, you can see what happened." Wade looked down at the three men. They were breathing at least, though one had a nose that would never sit straight on his face again, and another was missing at least 2 teeth. The third was just starting to groan and roll onto his side. "Miss Garrison," Wade said, turning his attention to the woman, "I am going to need you to come down to the office with me." Her eyes, he noticed, were the color of honey in sunlight, and they blazed with defiance. "I defended myself. That is not a crime." "No, madam, it is not. But I still need to get your statement. These men might press charges, and I need to have everything documented properly." He kept his voice gentle, the way he might talk to a spooked horse. She lowered her fists slowly, and he saw her wince as she straightened her fingers. "Fine, but I'm not apologizing for protecting myself. Would not dream of asking you to," Wade said. He helped the three troublemakers to their feet, noting their names and telling them to come by his office the next morning if they wanted to file a complaint. They stumbled out, muttering and holding various injured body parts. Then Wade turned back to the woman who had put them there. "After you, Miss Garrison." She walked past him with her head held high, and Wade caught the scent of lavender soap mixed with honest sweat. He followed her out into the brilliant Utah sunshine, where the red rocks in the distance seemed to glow like embers. St. George sat in a valley surrounded by those magnificent formations, and the summer heat made the air shimmer above the dirt streets. His office was a small building next to the courthouse, with a desk, 2 chairs, and 3 cells in the back that were blessedly empty at the moment. Wade gestured to one of the chairs and went to pump some water into a basin. "You should clean those," he said, nodding at her hands. Laura Garrison looked down at her knuckles as if seeing them for the first time. "They will be fine." "They will get infected if you do not clean them," Wade said firmly, "and I have seen men lose fingers to infection that started from less than that." She hesitated, then moved to the basin. Wade watched as she dipped her hands into the water, saw her jaw tighten against the sting. Up close, he could see that the scars on her hands were extensive. Some were old and silver, others still pink. There were marks that looked like they came from knives, from glass, from rope burns, and God knew what else. "How long have you been fighting?" he asked quietly. "Long enough to know how," she replied, not meeting his eyes. Wade pulled out his notebook and pencil. "All right, tell me what happened, from the beginning." She dried her hands on the cloth he offered and sat down across from him. "I went to the saloon to deliver some mending I had done for the owner. He pays me to fix the tablecloths and curtains when they get damaged. Those 3 men were drinking, and they said things when I walked past. Crude things. I ignored them and did my business with the bartender, but when I tried to leave, one of them stepped in front of me. Said a woman who looked like me should not be so standoffish. I told him to move. He did not. He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises, and his friend laughed and said they could teach me some manners. "So you hit them," Wade said, writing it all down. "So I defended myself," she corrected. "The first man would not let go of my arm, so I broke his nose. His friend came at me from the side, so I hit him in the throat. The third one managed to land a punch on my ribs before I knocked him down." Wade looked up from his notes. "You took down 3 grown men. They were drunk, I was sober, and I have had practice." She said it matter-of-factly, without pride or shame. "I can see that." Wade set down his pencil. "Miss Garrison, I have been marshal of this town for 2 years now, and I have never seen a woman fight like that. I have barely seen men fight like that. My father taught me, she said softly. He said the world was not kind to women, and I should know how to protect myself. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. He died 3 years ago. Her voice remained steady, but Wade saw something flicker in her eyes. I am sorry for your loss. He paused, then added, You are not in any trouble, Miss Garrison. Those men assaulted you first. I will make that clear in my report. But I would recommend staying away from the saloon for a few days, just in case they have friends who might cause more problems. She stood up. Thank you, Marshal. Is there anything else you need from me? Just one thing. Wade stood as well. Why do you keep doing work that puts you in places where trouble might find you? Laura finally met his eyes directly, and he saw something fierce and proud in her gaze. Because I need to eat, Marshal, and I do not have the luxury of avoiding every place where men might be drinking. If I did that, I would have nowhere to work at all. She had a point, and Wade knew it. Fair enough. But if anyone gives you trouble again, you come find me. That is what I'm here for. I can handle myself. I can see that. But you should not have to handle everything alone. Something in her expression softened slightly. I will keep that in mind. After she left, Wade sat at his desk for a long time, thinking about those scarred hands and the woman who bore them with such dignity. He had seen a lot in his 30 years, fought in the war when he was barely old enough to hold a rifle, and spent the last decade trying to keep order in various frontier towns. But Laura Garrison was something new. Over the next few weeks, Wade found himself noticing her around town more than he had before. She walked with purpose, always moving from one job to another. He learned that she took in mending, did laundry for the hotel, helped the baker in the early mornings, and sometimes worked in the general store when they needed extra hands. She lived in a small room behind the seamstress shop, paying her rent by doing alterations. He also noticed that men gave her a wide berth. Word had spread about what happened at the saloon, and the 3 troublemakers had left town rather than face the embarrassment of pressing charges against a woman who had bested them so thoroughly. One evening in early August, Wade was making his rounds when he heard the sound of breaking glass coming from the alley behind the general store. He ran toward the noise, hand on his pistol, and found Laura locked in a struggle with a man nearly twice her size. "Let her go!" Wade shouted, drawing his weapon. The man spun around, keeping Laura in front of him like a shield. Wade recognized him as Tom Fletcher, a ranch hand who had been in and out of trouble since he arrived in St. George last month. "She owes me money," Fletcher snarled. "Her father owed me money, and now she has to pay." "I do not owe you anything," Laura spat, struggling against his grip. "My father never borrowed money from anyone, least of all you. Is that right? Well, maybe you can pay me in other ways then." Fletcher's meaning was clear, and it made Wade's blood boil. "Last chance, Fletcher. Let her go, or I will shoot you where you stand." Fletcher laughed. "You would not dare, not with her in the way?" He was wrong. Wade had been an Army sharpshooter, and he knew his capabilities, but he also knew there were better ways to handle this. He holstered his pistol and held up his hands. "All right, Fletcher, let us talk about this. How much did her father supposedly owe you?" $50. Wade whistled low. "That is a lot of money. You have proof of this debt?" Fletcher's eyes shifted. "A man's word should be good enough. Not when the man you claim gave you his word is dead and cannot defend himself." Wade took a step closer. "Here is what I think happened. You heard that Laura's father passed away, and you figured you could take advantage of a woman alone. You made up this debt hoping to intimidate her into doing whatever you wanted. Am I close?" "You do not know nothing," Fletcher said, but his grip on Laura had loosened slightly. "I know that you are digging yourself into a deep hole right now. Assault, attempted robbery, making false claims about a debt. That is enough to land you in jail for a good long while. Or you could let her go right now, apologize, and get out of town before I decide to press charges." Fletcher wavered. Wade could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing his options. Then Laura made the decision for him. She brought her heel down hard on his instep and simultaneously drove her elbow into his stomach. Fletcher's grip broke, and she spun away from him. Before Wade could react, she had landed 2 solid punches to Fletcher's jaw, sending him reeling backward into a stack of crates. Wade moved quickly, hauling Fletcher to his feet and twisting his arms behind his back. "Looks like the choice is made for you then." You are spending the night in jail, and tomorrow you are leaving St. George for good." He marched Fletcher to his office and locked him in one of the cells, then went back to find Laura sitting on the steps of the general store, cradling her right hand. "Let me see," Wade said, crouching down in front of her. She held out her hand reluctantly. The knuckles were split again, blood welling from the fresh wounds and from some of the old scars that had reopened. "You need to stop leading with your knuckles," Wade said gently. "You are going to do permanent damage. I know how to fight. I can see that. But you are going to hurt yourself worse than you hurt them if you keep this up." He pulled out his handkerchief and wrapped it carefully around her hand. "Come on. We are going to the doctor." "I cannot afford the doctor." "Then it is a good thing I can." He helped her to her feet. "And before you argue, consider it part of my job. I need to document injuries sustained during an assault, and Doc Henderson can do that while he patches you up." Laura looked like she wanted to protest, but exhaustion won out. She nodded, and they walked together through the darkening streets to the doctor's house. Doc Henderson was an older man with gentle hands and kind eyes. He examined Laura's hands carefully, shaking his head at what he saw. "You have broken bones here that healed wrong," he said, probing gently at her right hand. "And this scarring is extensive. What happened to you, child?" "Life happened," Laura said simply. The doctor cleaned and bandaged her hands, giving Wade a list of instructions for changing the dressings. Then he refused to accept payment, saying that anyone brave enough to stand up to Tom Fletcher deserved free medical care. Wade walked Laura back to her room. The night was hot and still, and the stars overhead seemed close enough to touch. They did not talk much, but the silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. At her door, Laura turned to face him. "Thank you, Marshal, for tonight and for the doctor." "Wade," he said. "You can call me Wade." She hesitated, then nodded. "Laura." "I know." He smiled. "Get some rest, Laura, and try to avoid any more fights for a few days, will you?" "I will do my best." She paused with her hand on the door. "That man, Fletcher. Did my father really owe him money?" "No. I checked the records after the incident at the saloon. Your father did not owe anybody anything. Fletcher was lying, hoping to take advantage of you." Relief flashed across her face. "My father was a good man. He would not have left me with debts." "I believe you." Wade tipped his hat to her. "Good night, Laura." "Good night, Wade." After that night, something shifted between them. Wade found reasons to patrol past the places where Laura worked. Sometimes he would stop in, just to make sure everything was all right. Sometimes they would talk, little conversations about the weather or the news from back east, or the way the red rocks change color in the evening light. He learned that she had grown up in Kansas, that her mother had died when she was young, and that her father had worked as a farrier and blacksmith. He had taught her to fight after a group of boys had tried to hurt her when she was 12. She had been fighting ever since, defending herself against men who thought a woman alone was easy prey. Wade told her about his own past, about growing up in Texas, about the war that had stolen his youth and his innocence, about drifting from town to town before finally settling in St. George. He told her about the weight of trying to keep order in a place where order was always fragile, about the satisfaction of helping people and the frustration of not being able to save everyone. By September, Wade had started bringing her coffee in the mornings when she worked at the bakery, showing up just as the sun was rising over the red rocks. They would sit on the steps and watch the town wake up, talking about everything and nothing. One morning, Laura looked at her bandaged hands and sighed. "These will never really heal, you know. There is too much damage." Wade took her hand gently, unwrapping the bandage to look at the scars underneath. He traced one long scar that ran from her thumb to her wrist. "This one? Broken bottle. A man in Dodge City thought I should smile more." He traced another, a circular mark on the back of her hand. "And this?" "Cigar burn. Different man, different town, same problem." Wade felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "This one?" He touched a pale scar across her knuckles. "That was from protecting a little girl. 2 men were hurting her, and I made them stop." He looked up at her, saw the fierce pride in her eyes mixed with old pain. "Laura Garrison, you are the bravest woman I have ever known." She blinked, surprised. "What?" "You heard me. Each one of these scars is proof of your courage. You have been fighting your whole life, standing up to men twice your size, protecting yourself and others. That takes more bravery than most people will ever have to show. He traced another scar gently. This is not damage. This is evidence of your strength. Laura's eyes filled with tears, and she turned her head away. I am not brave. I am just tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being alone, tired of always having to prove that I deserve basic respect. Wade set down her hand and moved to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You do not have to prove anything to me. I see you, Laura. Not just what you can do with your fists, but who you are underneath. You are kind, despite everything you have been through. You work harder than anyone I know. You help people even when no one is watching. And yes, you are fierce when you need to be. But that does not make you less worthy of gentleness. She was crying openly now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. I do not know how to be anything other than what I am. I am not asking you to be anything different. Wade reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I am just asking if maybe you would let someone stand beside you for a change. Let someone help carry the weight. Laura looked at him then, really looked at him, and Wade felt something pass between them that was bigger than words. Why, she whispered, why would you want that? Because somewhere between watching you take down 3 men in a saloon and sitting here in the morning sun with you, I fell in love with you. He said it simply, honestly, without artifice. I know that might not be what you want to hear. You have had enough men causing problems in your life, but I needed you to know that you do not have to keep fighting alone. Not anymore. For a long moment, Laura did not say anything. Then she took his hand, lacing her scarred fingers through his. I am not easy to love, Wade. I have sharp edges and old wounds. I do not know how to be soft. Good thing I am not looking for soft, then. He squeezed her hand gently. I am looking for real. And Laura, you are the most real person I have ever met. She laughed, a sound that was half sob, half genuine amusement. You are either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. He smiled at her. Will you give me a chance? Let me court you properly, the way you deserve? Laura studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. All right, yes. But I am not making any promises about what comes after. I am not asking for promises, just a chance. From that morning on, Wade courted Laura with the same determination he brought to everything else in his life. He walked her home from work every evening, carrying her basket and listening to her talk about her day. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, the hardy blooms that grew in impossible places. He taught her to shoot, insisting that if she was going to keep fighting, she should have every tool available to defend herself. In turn, Laura showed him parts of St. George he had never noticed before. She took him to a hidden spring in the red rocks where the water was cool and clear. She introduced him to the families she helped, the people who relied on her mending and her washing and her fierce protection. He saw how much the community loved her, even if some were afraid of her strength. In October, the owner of the saloon where Laura had fought those 3 men approached Wade with a proposition. I want to hire Miss Garrison as security, he said. Pay her a regular wage to keep troublemakers in line. After what I saw her do, I figure she is better than any bouncer I could bring in from elsewhere. Wade brought the offer to Laura that evening. She looked skeptical. Work in a saloon? People already talk about me enough. They talk because they do not understand you. But the pay would be steady, and you would be doing something you are good at. Plus, I would be right there if anything got out of hand. Laura considered it for a long time. I would rather be paid to stop fights than to do mending for pennies, she admitted, and at least this way I could use my skills for something useful. She accepted the position, and it proved to be a good fit. Most nights, her presence alone was enough to keep trouble from starting. Men who might have started a brawl thought twice when they saw Laura standing by the door, her scarred hands visible, and her expression calm but alert. The few times someone did cause problems, she handled them efficiently and with minimal damage. Wade found that he liked having her nearby. Between his rounds, he would stop by the saloon, and they would exchange glances across the room. Sometimes she would smile at him, a small, private smile that was just for him, and it made his heart do strange things in his chest. One evening in November, a stranger rode into town. He was a big man with cold eyes and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He went straight to the saloon and ordered a bottle of whiskey, downing it like water. Laura was at her post by the door, and Wade saw her tense when the stranger looked her way. There was recognition in her eyes, and fear, which was something Wade had never seen in her before. He made his way over to her. "You know him?" "His name is Frank Mercer." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He knew my father." "Is that a problem?" "It might be." She watched Mercer with wary eyes. "My father won a lot of money from him in a card game, years ago. Mercer accused him of cheating, but it was not true. My father was just a better player. We left town the next day because Mercer had threatened to kill him." Wade's hand moved to his pistol. "Stay behind me." But it was too late. Mercer had seen them talking, and he stood up, swaying slightly from the whiskey. Well, Laura Garrison, I heard you was in St. George. Came all this way to settle an old score." "My father is dead," Laura said, stepping forward despite Wade's attempt to keep her back. "Whatever score you think you have, it died with him." "See, that is where you are wrong, girl. Your father took $300 from me, said he won it fair, but I knew better. Now he is dead, so the debt falls to you." "There is no debt," Wade said firmly, "and you need to leave, now." Mercer ignored him, his eyes locked on Laura. "You can pay me back in cash, or we can work out another arrangement. I hear you are quite the fighter. Maybe we could put on a show. People would pay good money to see a woman brawl." "I am not interested in your arrangements," Laura said. "You lost money in a fair game, and you have been bitter about it for years. That is not my problem." Mercer's face darkened. "You have got your father's mouth, girl. Maybe I should teach you some respect, the way I should have taught him." He lunged at her, moving faster than Wade expected for a man who had drunk so much. But Laura was faster. She sidestepped his rush and delivered a sharp blow to his kidney as he passed. Mercer roared in pain and swung wildly. His fist connected with Laura's jaw, snapping her head to the side. Wade was on him in a second, grabbing Mercer from behind and hauling him away from Laura. But Mercer was strong and drunk and angry, a dangerous combination. He broke free and came at Wade, landing a solid punch to his ribs that drove the air from his lungs. The saloon had erupted into chaos, men shouting and backing away to give them room. Wade and Mercer traded blows, crashing into tables and chairs. Wade was a good fighter, trained and experienced, but Mercer fought like a rabid animal, all fury and no finesse. Then Laura was there, grabbing a chair and bringing it down on Mercer's back. The wood splintered, and Mercer stumbled forward. Wade used the opportunity to land a solid punch to his jaw, followed by another to his stomach. Mercer went down hard, crashing into a table that collapsed under his weight. Wade stood over him, breathing hard. "You are done here, Mercer. You are going to spend the night in jail, and tomorrow you are leaving St. George and never coming back. If I see your face in this town again, I will arrest you for assault and throw every charge I can think of at you." Mercer groaned but did not try to get up. Wade hauled him to his feet with Laura's help, and together they dragged him to the jail. After locking him in a cell, Wade turned to Laura. Her jaw was already swelling where Mercer had hit her, and she was favoring her left hand. Wade led her to his desk and lit a lamp, examining her injuries in the light. "That hand is broken," he said, touching the swollen knuckles gently. "Probably," Laura agreed, "but it was worth it to see him go down. You should not have jumped in. I had it handled. He was going to hurt you worse if I had not." She looked at him with those honey-colored eyes. "I told you I know how to fight. And I told you that you do not have to fight alone anymore." Wade cupped her uninjured hand in his. "We are partners now, Laura. That means we protect each other." She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. "I am not used to having a partner. Get used to it, because I am not going anywhere." They sat like that for a long moment, just breathing together, letting the adrenaline fade. Then Wade got up and went to get the doctor, who came and set Laura's broken hand with practiced efficiency. Mercer left town the next morning, escorted to the edge of St. George by Wade and the mayor. He went without further trouble, though the look he gave them promised that he would not forget what happened. Laura's hand healed slowly over the following weeks. Wade helped her with everything, from getting dressed to eating to washing her hair. She protested at first, uncomfortable with being dependent on anyone, but Wade was patient and persistent. "Let me help you," he would say. "Not because you are weak, but because you are healing. There is no shame in accepting help when you need it. Gradually, Laura began to relax into his care. She let him brush her hair in the evenings, sitting on the steps of his office while he worked the tangles out gently. She let him read to her from the newspaper, his deep voice stumbling sometimes over the bigger words in a way that made her smile. She let him hold her when nightmares woke her, memories of all the fights she had been in and all the scars she had earned. One evening in December, as the weather turned cool and the red rocks took on a deeper hue in the fading light, Wade took Laura out to the hidden spring she had shown him months before. He had packed a picnic, simple food, but made with care, and they sat on a blanket watching the stars come out. "Laura," Wade said after they had eaten, "I need to ask you something." She turned to look at him, and even in the dim light, he could see the curiosity in her eyes. "What is it?" He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. It was not fancy or expensive, but it was honest and real, like everything between them. "I know we have not been courting long by most standards," Wade said, "but I feel like I have known you forever. You are the strongest, bravest, most genuine person I have ever met. You make me want to be a better man. You make me believe that even in this hard world, there is room for something good and true." He took a breath. "Laura Garrison, would you marry me?" Laura stared at the ring, then at Wade, then back at the ring. Her scarred hands came up to cover her mouth, and tears began to slide down her cheeks. "You cannot possibly want to marry me," she whispered. "I am damaged goods, Wade. Everyone says so. I am too hard, too rough, too used to fighting. I would make a terrible wife." "No," Wade said firmly. He took her hands in his, those scarred, strong, beautiful hands. "You would make a perfect wife, not because you are soft or delicate, but because you are real. You are loyal and brave and kind, even when the world has given you every reason not to be. You are exactly who I want by my side for the rest of my life." He kissed each scarred knuckle, then looked into her eyes. "These hands have fought for survival, for justice, for protection of those weaker than you. These hands are not damaged. They are proof of your incredible strength, and I would be honored if you would let me hold them for the rest of our days." Laura was crying openly now, but she was also smiling. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you, Wade Carter. I do not know how to be a conventional wife, but I will try to be a good partner to you." "You already are." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They were married 2 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the church. The whole town turned out, because by then everyone knew the story of the brave woman and the marshal who loved her. Laura wore a dress that the seamstress had made specially for her, simple white cotton with long sleeves that covered most of her scars. But she did not hide her hands. She let them show, those scarred, strong hands. And when Wade took them in, his during the vows, he did not flinch or look away. "I promise to stand beside you," Wade said, looking into her eyes, "to protect you when you need protection, and to let you fight your own battles when you want to. I promise to honor your strength and to never ask you to be less than who you are. I promise to love every part of you, including these brave, scarred hands that have fought so hard for so long." Laura's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "I promise to trust you, even though trust does not come easily to me. I promise to let you in, even when I want to build walls. I promise to fight for us, for our life together, with the same fierceness I have fought for my own survival. And I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as I live." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed her in front of everyone, and the church erupted in cheers and applause. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, a place with a view of the red rocks and enough room for both of them to breathe. Laura continued working security at the saloon, and Wade continued his duties as marshal. They fell into a rhythm, a partnership that worked because they respected each other's strengths and supported each other's weaknesses. The first few months of marriage were an adjustment. Laura had lived alone for so long that having someone constantly in her space felt strange. She would sometimes wake in the night, disoriented, reaching for a weapon that was not there before remembering she was safe. Wade would wake with her, pulling her close and reminding her where she was, who she was with. "I am here," he would murmur into her hair. "You are safe. We are safe." Slowly, Laura learned to relax. She learned that not every man was a threat, that she did not have to be constantly ready for a fight. She learned to let Wade see her vulnerable, to let him care for her, without feeling weak. In turn, Wade learned about the depths of trauma that Laura carried. He learned about the men who had hurt her over the years, the scars that were not just on her hands but on her soul. He learned to recognize when she needed space and when she needed closeness. He learned that loving someone meant accepting all of them, the strong parts and the broken parts and everything in between. One evening in March, almost a year after they first met, Wade came home to find Laura sitting on their porch, staring out at the red rocks. He sat down beside her and took her hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I was thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago," she said. "Back then, I was alone, always fighting, always on guard. I never thought I would find someone who could accept me as I am. I never thought I would have a home that felt safe. And now, I have you." She turned to look at him, and the love in her eyes made his breath catch. "You see these scars, and you call them proof of bravery instead of evidence of damage. You make me feel like I am not just a fighter, but a whole person, someone worth loving." Wade lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her scarred knuckles. "You are worth loving, Laura. You always were, even before I came along. I am just lucky enough to be the one who gets to show you that." They sat together as the sun set, painting the red rocks in shades of orange and pink and gold. And for the first time in her life, Laura felt truly at peace. The following months brought new challenges and new joys. In the summer, a group of outlaws tried to rob the bank, and Laura and Wade worked together to stop them. Laura's fighting skills and Wade's strategic thinking proved to be a formidable combination. They captured all 4 outlaws without any civilians getting hurt, and the town celebrated them as heroes. But it was the quiet moments that Laura treasured most, the mornings when Wade would bring her coffee in bed, the evenings when they would walk through town hand in hand, the nights when they would lie tangled together, talking about their dreams for the future. "I want to build something," Laura said one night as they lay in the darkness. "Not just a life for us, but something bigger. A place where women who are in trouble can come for help. A place where they can learn to fight back, to protect themselves." Wade considered this. Like a school? Maybe, or just a refuge. Somewhere safe, where they do not have to be afraid. She turned to face him. "I know what it is like to be alone and scared. I want to help others who are in that situation." "Then we will make it happen," Wade said simply. "We will find a building, set it up properly, get the word out. You can teach them to fight, and I can teach them about the law, about their rights. Together, we can make a real difference." Laura kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and love into that kiss. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I ask myself the same thing every day," Wade replied, pulling her closer. They started working on the refuge that fall. The mayor donated an old building that had been sitting empty, and members of the community pitched in to help repair and furnish it. Laura worked tirelessly, her enthusiasm infectious. She drew up plans for classes in self-defense, in reading and writing for those who had never learned, in practical skills like sewing and cooking. The refuge opened in November of 1879, just over a year after Wade and Laura had married. Women came from all over the territory, some fleeing violent husbands, others escaping brothels or abusive employers. Laura met each one with compassion and understanding, sharing her own story and showing them her scars. "You are not alone," she would tell them, "and you are not weak for needing help. The bravest thing you can do is keep surviving, keep fighting for a better life." She taught them to throw a punch, to break a hold, to use their voice and their presence to deter attackers. She taught them that they had value beyond what anyone else said about them. And she did it all with Wade by her side, supporting her, believing in her vision. By the spring of 1880, the refugee was housing 15 women and their children. It had become a vital part of the community, proof that even in the harsh reality of the frontier, there was room for compassion and change. One evening in April, Laura discovered she was pregnant. She told Wade over dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "A baby," Wade said slowly, a smile spreading across his face. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Laura asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy? Laura, I am overjoyed." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "We are going to be parents. We are going to raise a child who knows love and safety and strength. How could I be anything but happy?" Laura let herself relax into his embrace. "I am scared," she admitted. "What if I am not a good mother? What if I am too hard, too rough?" "You will be an amazing mother," Wade assured her, "because you know what it is like to struggle, and you will make sure our child never has to feel alone or afraid. You will teach them to be strong and kind and brave, just like you." The pregnancy was difficult. Laura's body, so used to fighting and hard physical labor, struggled with the changes. She was sick constantly in the first few months, and as she grew larger, she found it harder to move and work. Wade took over more of her duties at the refuge, and the other women rallied around her, repaying the care she had shown them. In December of 1880, Laura gave birth to a son. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Wade feared he would lose her, but Laura fought through it with the same determination she brought to everything else. And when the baby finally arrived, squalling and healthy, Wade wept with relief and joy. They named him Samuel after Laura's father. He had dark hair like his mother and his father's blue eyes, and from the moment Wade held him, he knew his life had changed forever. "Hello, Samuel," Wade whispered, cradling the tiny bundle. "I am your father, and I promise I will do everything in my power to give you a good life. I will teach you to be strong and kind. I will show you how to protect the people you love, and I will make sure you know how lucky we are to have your mother." Laura watched from the bed, exhausted but smiling. "He is perfect, just like his mother," Wade said, bringing the baby to her so she could hold him. The first months of parenthood were chaotic and exhausting. Samuel was a fussy baby, prone to crying at all hours and difficult to soothe, but Wade and Laura worked together, taking turns walking him through the night, singing to him, rocking him until he finally slept. Laura struggled at first with the vulnerability of being a mother. She was so used to being strong and independent that having this tiny person depend on her completely felt overwhelming. But Wade was there, constant and patient, reminding her that she did not have to do everything alone. "You are doing wonderfully," he would tell her when she doubted herself. "Look at him, Laura. He is healthy and loved. What more could a child need?" As Samuel grew, he proved to be a happy, curious child. He had his mother's determination and his father's calm temperament. Laura would sit with him for hours, telling him stories about his grandfather, about the importance of standing up for what was right, about treating everyone with respect and dignity. When Samuel was 2 years old, Laura discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. In the fall of 1883, she gave birth to a daughter they named Mary after Wade's mother. Mary was the opposite of Samuel in temperament. Where he had been fussy and difficult, she was calm and content. She would lie in her cradle for hours, watching the world with wide, curious eyes. Laura fell in love with her immediately, this tiny girl who had her father's steadiness. Life settled into a new rhythm. Wade had been promoted to territorial marshal, overseeing law enforcement for a wider area. Laura continued running the refuge, though she worked fewer hours now that she had 2 young children. The refuge had expanded, taking over another building and employing several of the women Laura had helped to train. Samuel and Mary grew up surrounded by strong women who had overcome incredible odds. They learned early that the world was not always kind, but that with courage and compassion, it could be made better. Samuel would sit in on Laura's self-defense classes, watching his mother demonstrate techniques with the same fierce grace she brought to everything. Mary would toddle around the refuge, bringing smiles to the faces of women who had forgotten how to smile. One evening when Samuel was 6 and Mary was 3, the family sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the red rocks. Samuel was playing with a wooden horse Wade had carved for him, and Mary was nestled in Laura's lap, nearly asleep. "Papa," Samuel said suddenly, "why does Mama have so many scars on her hands?" Wade looked at Laura, who nodded slightly. "Come here, son," Wade said, and Samuel climbed onto his lap. "Your mother has those scars because she is the bravest person I know. Each one tells a story about a time she stood up to someone who was trying to hurt her or hurt someone else. She fought to protect herself and others, and those scars are proof of her courage." Samuel looked at his mother with wide eyes. "Really?" "Really," Laura said. She held out her hands so Samuel could see them clearly. "This scar is from when I stopped some men from hurting a little girl who was your age. And this one is from when I protected myself from someone who did not understand that no means no." "Did it hurt?" Samuel asked. "Yes, it hurt, but sometimes doing the right thing hurts. That does not mean we should not do it." Samuel traced one of the scars gently, the way he had seen his father do many times. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you, Mama." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "You already are brave, Samuel. You and your sister both. You have kind hearts and strong spirits. That is the best kind of bravery." Wade wrapped his arms around his family, holding them close as the last light faded from the sky. "I am the luckiest man alive," he said softly. "Why?" Mary asked sleepily, her small voice muffled against Laura's shoulder. "Because I have all of you. Because every day I get to wake up next to the woman I love and watch our children grow. Because we built something good here, something that matters." Laura leaned her head against his shoulder. "We built it together. That is what makes it strong." The years passed, bringing both challenges and triumphs. Samuel grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved books and learning. He would spend hours reading about law and justice, following his father on rounds when Wade would let him. Mary turned out to be a natural fighter, inheriting her mother's instincts and her father's strategic mind. By the time she was 8, she was already helping Laura teach self-defense classes at the refuge. The refuge itself became a model for other communities. Women from across the territory would come to visit, to learn from Laura's methods, to see how a single person's determination could create real change. Laura trained other women to open similar places in their own towns, spreading the message that women deserve safety and respect. Wade's career continued to flourish. He was respected throughout the territory for his fairness and his dedication to justice. But no matter how busy he got, he always made time for his family. Every evening, he would come home to Laura and the children, leaving his work behind to focus on what mattered most. One day in the summer of 1889, when Samuel was 9 and Mary was 6, a familiar figure rode into St. George. Frank Mercer had returned, older and meaner, and he had brought friends. They came to the house in the evening, 6 men on horseback, surrounding the property. Wade was still at his office, and Laura was alone with the children. She heard the horses and looked out the window, her heart sinking when she recognized Mercer. She turned to Samuel and Mary, keeping her voice calm. "I need you both to go to your room and hide under the bed. Do not come out until either your father or I come to get you. Do you understand?" "Mama, what is wrong?" Samuel asked, his eyes wide. "Just do as I say, sweetheart. Quickly now." The children ran to their room, and Laura took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then she walked out onto the porch to face Mercer and his men. "You have a lot of nerve coming here," she said, her voice steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "I told you I would be back," Mercer said, grinning through his scarred face. "Told you I did not forget what you and your marshal did to me. Thought I would return the favor, with interest. My husband will be here soon. You should leave while you still can. See, that is the thing. We made sure your husband got called away on business. He is halfway to Cedar City by now, chasing a lead on some fake outlaws, which means you are all alone, Laura Garrison. Or, should I say, Laura Carter, now." Laura's mind raced, calculating odds and options. 6 against 1 were not good, but she had faced worse. She had her rifle just inside the door, and she knew how to use it, but her children were in the house, and she could not risk them getting caught in crossfire. "What do you want, Mercer?" "I want what I have always wanted, compensation for what your father took from me. And since you refuse to pay, I figure I will just take it. Nice house you have got here, nice life. Be a shame if something happened to it." "Touch my home or my children and I will kill you," Laura said, and the conviction in her voice made even Mercer pause. He recovered quickly, laughing. "Big talk for a woman alone." "She is not alone." The voice came from behind the men, and they all spun around to see Wade standing there with his rifle raised. He was not alone either. Behind him were 10 men from town, all armed, all ready to defend their marshal and his family. "I figured you might be stupid enough to try something like this, Mercer," Wade said calmly. "So I had someone watching for strangers. They came and got me before you even reached my property. Now you have a choice. You and your men can ride out of here right now and never come back. Or I can arrest all of you for trespassing, threatening a lawman's family, and anything else I can think of." Mercer looked around at the armed men surrounding him, then back at Wade and Laura. The odds had shifted dramatically. "This is not over," he snarled. "Yes, it is," Wade said. "Because if I see you in this territory again, I will not arrest you. I will shoot you on sight, and I will be well within my rights as a territorial marshal. Your choice, Mercer." Leave now and live, or stay and face the consequences. For a long moment, Mercer stared at them with pure hatred in his eyes. Then he spurred his horse and rode off, his men following. Wade and the other men kept their weapons trained on them until they were out of sight. Only then did Wade lower his rifle and run to Laura, pulling her into his arms. She was shaking, all the fear she had held back finally breaking through. "The children!" she gasped. "I need to get the children!" They went inside together, and Laura called out to Samuel and Mary. The two children emerged from their room, frightened but unharmed. Laura gathered them into her arms, holding them tight while Wade stood guard. That night, after the children were asleep and the men from town had gone home with Wade's thanks, Laura and Wade sat together in their bedroom. "I was so scared," Laura admitted. "Not for myself, but for them. The thought of those men hurting Samuel or Mary." "They did not," Wade said firmly. "You kept them safe. You were brave and smart, and you protected our children. That is all that matters. What if Mercer comes back? He will not. Men like him are bullies. They only act when they think they have the advantage. Today he learned that we are not alone, that this whole community stands with us. He will not risk coming back." Laura nodded, but Wade could see the worry still lingering in her eyes. He took her hands in his, those scarred, beautiful hands that had fought so hard for so long. "Laura," he said softly, "do you remember what I told you the first time I saw these scars? I called you the bravest woman I know. That is even more true now than it was then. You have built a life, raised a family, created a refuge for women in need. You have turned your pain into purpose, your scars into strength. Mercer can try to threaten us all he wants, but he cannot take away what we have built." Laura looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Wade. "I could not have built any of this without you. You gave me something I never thought I would have. You gave me a partner, a home, a family. You gave me a reason to stop just surviving and start living." Wade kissed her gently. "We gave that to each other? That is what marriage is, Laura. We make each other stronger." They held each other through the night, drawing comfort from their closeness. And though they remained watchful in the days that followed, Mercer never returned. True to Wade's prediction, he had been all threat and no substance, unwilling to face real opposition. Life continued, and the years brought more changes. Samuel, serious and studious, decided he wanted to become a lawyer, to fight for justice through the law, the way his parents fought for it, through action. He left for school back east when he was 18, promising to write often and return when his education was complete. Mary, fierce and compassionate like her mother, took over more responsibilities at the refuge. She had a gift for reaching women who had given up hope, for showing them that they could be strong. By the time she was 16, she was running self-defense classes on her own, and Laura watched with pride as her daughter continued the work she had started. In 1895, when Samuel was 25 and freshly graduated from law school, he returned to St. George with a wife, a kind woman from Philadelphia named Catherine. They settled into a house near Wade and Laura, and Samuel opened a practice focused on helping women and families who could not afford traditional legal representation. Mary married a year later to a young teacher who had come to St. George to work at the school. His name was James, and he had fallen in love with Mary the first time he saw her teaching a class at the refuge, her movements graceful and powerful as she demonstrated techniques. They built a home together, and James supported Mary's work wholeheartedly, even helping out at the refuge when needed. Wade and Laura grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect. One evening in 1900, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset for the 1,000th time, Laura looked down at her hands. The scars were still there, faded now, but permanent. She thought about all the years that had passed since the day Wade first traced those scars and called her brave. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, following her gaze. "I was thinking about how much has changed since we met," Laura said, "and how much has stayed the same. Such as these scars. They are still here, reminders of who I was, what I survived." She paused. "But now, when I look at them, I do not just see pain and fighting. I see survival. I see strength. I see proof that I made it through." Wade took her hand and traced one of the old scars, the gesture as familiar now as breathing. They are beautiful, he said. Every single one, because they are part of you, and you are the most beautiful person I have ever known. Laura smiled and leaned against his shoulder. How do you still know exactly what to say after all these years? Because it is easy to speak the truth when you love someone as much as I love you. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to pink to purple. Their children were grown and happy. The refuge was thriving, having helped hundreds of women over the years. The town of Saint. George had grown and prospered, becoming a place where women could walk safely at night, where justice was more than just a word. We did it, Laura said softly. We built something good. We did, Wade agreed, and it will outlast us. Samuel and Mary will carry on the work. The refuge will continue helping women long after we are gone. We have created a legacy, Laura, one of compassion and strength and justice. Laura turned to kiss him, her scarred hand cupping his weathered cheek. I love you, Wade Carter. Thank you for seeing past these scars to the person underneath. Thank you for making me believe I was worth loving. You were always worth loving, Wade said. I just got lucky enough to be the one who convinced you of it. As the stars came out over the red rocks of Utah, Wade and Laura sat together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the life they had created. The journey had been hard, marked by scars both visible and invisible, but they had walked it together, and that had made all the difference. In the years that followed, Wade and Laura continued to be pillars of their community. They became grandparents 3 times over, as Samuel and Catherine had 2 children, and Mary and James had a daughter. Laura taught all of her grandchildren to fight, to stand up for themselves, to never let anyone make them feel less than they were. Wade retired from his position as territorial marshal in 1905 after nearly 30 years of service. The town threw a celebration in his honor, and person after person stood up to talk about how he had helped them, protected them, fought for them. But the most moving speech came from Laura. My husband, she said, standing before the crowd with her scarred hands visible for all to see, is the best man I have ever known. When we met, I was a woman who had been fighting her whole life just to survive. I was covered in scars and convinced that I would always be alone. But Wade saw something in me that I could not see in myself. He saw strength where I saw damage. He saw courage where I saw necessity. He saw a future where I saw only survival. She paused, looking at Wade with all the love in her heart shining in her eyes. He traced every scar on my hands and called me the bravest woman he knew. And in doing that, he gave me something I had never had before. He gave me permission to be more than just a fighter. He gave me permission to be loved, to be soft when I needed to be, to build instead of just defend. Every good thing in my life came after I met this man. Our children, our home, the refuge that has helped so many women. None of it would exist without Wade's support. Namisi, his belief in me, his unwavering love. The crowd erupted in applause, and Wade stood to embrace his wife, tears streaming down his face. I love you, he whispered in her ear. Always have, always will. They settled into retirement, spending their days working in the garden Wade had planted, visiting with their children and grandchildren, and sitting on the porch watching the sunsets that never grew old. The refuge continued under Mary's direction, and Samuel's law practice helped dozens of families navigate the complicated legal system. In 1912, on a warm spring evening, very much like the one where Wade had first proposed, Laura and Wade celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the house, filling it with laughter and love. After everyone had left and they were alone again, Wade took Laura's hands in his, studying the scars that he knew as well as his own face. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Marrying me, building this life? Laura looked at him in surprise. Regret? Wade, loving you is the best thing I ever did. You and these children and this life we built are my greatest accomplishments. Not the refuge, not the women I helped, not even surviving all those years before I met you. Those were all important, but they were just preparation for this. For us. I feel the same way, Wade said. Every morning when I wake up next to you, I thank God that I walked into that saloon the day you were fighting those men. Thank God I was smart enough to see past the tough exterior to the incredible woman underneath. Laura touched his face gently. We saved each other, Wade. You gave me a home and a family, and I gave you a purpose beyond just enforcing the law. We made each other whole. That we did. Wade kissed her palms, those scarred palms that had fought so hard and loved so fiercely. That we did. As they aged into their 70s, Wade and Laura remained inseparable. They were a common sight in St. George, the old marshal and his fierce wife, walking hand in hand through town, still deeply in love after decades together. Young couples would point to them as an example of what marriage could be, of how love could endure. The refuge that Laura founded had expanded to include a school for girls, teaching not just self-defense, but also reading, writing, arithmetic, and practical skills. It had become a beacon of hope, known throughout the territory and beyond. Women would travel for weeks just to reach it, knowing they would find safety and support within its walls. In 1918, as World War I raged in Europe and the world seemed to be changing faster than ever, Wade's health began to fail. He had lived a hard life, and the years of physical labor and violence had taken their toll. Laura nursed him with the same fierce devotion she brought to everything, refusing to leave his side. Samuel and Mary came to visit daily, bringing the grandchildren to sit with their grandfather. Wade would tell them stories about the old days, about fighting to build civilization in the wilderness, about meeting their grandmother and falling instantly in love with her courage. One evening in late October, as the leaves were turning and the air held the first hint of winter cold, Wade called Laura to his bedside. She came immediately, taking his hand in hers. "I need to tell you something," Wade said, his voice weak but clear. "I am listening." Laura brushed his hair back from his forehead, the gesture tender and familiar. "I am not afraid of dying, Laura. I have lived a full life, a good life, but I am afraid of leaving you. I am afraid you will be alone again." Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. "Wade Carter, you could never leave me. You will be in my heart until the day I die, and then we will be together again. You taught me that I did not have to face everything alone. Even when you are gone, I will still have our children, our grandchildren, and all the memories we made together. That is more than enough." Wade squeezed her hand weakly. "You are the bravest woman I have ever known. You always have been. Promise me you will keep being brave, keep helping people, keep making the world better. I promise, but only if you promise me something too. Anything? Promise me that you know how much I loved you, how much you changed my life, how grateful I am that you traced my scars and saw beauty instead of damage." "I know," Wade said softly. "I have always known. And Laura, you changed my life just as much. You taught me what real courage looks like. You taught me that strength comes in many forms. You taught me how to love with my whole heart." They stayed like that through the night, holding hands and talking about their life together. Wade spoke of the first time he saw her, standing in that saloon with blood on her hands and fire in her eyes. Laura spoke of how he had looked at her, not with pity or fear, but with respect and admiration. They remembered their wedding, the birth of their children, the building of the refuge, the thousands of small moments that had made up their years together. As dawn broke over the red rocks of Utah, painting them in shades of gold and rose, Wade took his last breath with Laura's hand in his and her voice in his ear, telling him one more time how much she loved him. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire territory. People came from hundreds of miles away to pay their respects to the marshal who had fought for justice, who had protected the vulnerable, who had loved his wife with a devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. Laura stood at the graveside, her children on either side of her, and spoke about the man she had loved for 40 years. "My husband saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. He valued me when I thought I had no value. He loved me when I believed I was unlovable. He took my scarred hands in his and told me I was brave, and in doing so, he gave me the courage to believe it myself. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment we spent together." In the months that followed Wade's death, Laura grieved deeply, but not alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love and support. The community that she and Wade had helped build rallied around her, bringing food and company and reminders that she was valued. Laura continued working at the refuge, finding comfort in helping others. The work had always been her passion, but now it became her solace as well. Every woman she helped, every life she touched, felt like a way of honoring Wade's memory and the partnership they had shared. She lived for another 12 years after Wade's death, years filled with purpose and love. She saw Mary take over full leadership of the refuge and expand it even further. She saw Samuel successfully argue a case before the territorial Supreme Court that established new protections for women. She met her great-grandchildren and told them stories about their great-grandfather, keeping his memory alive. On a spring evening in 1930, Laura sat on her porch watching the sunset, just as she and Wade had done so many times before. She was 82 years old, her body worn, but her spirit still strong. She looked down at her hands, those scarred hands that had fought and worked and loved. She thought about the scared young woman she had been when she first arrived in St. George, alone, and convinced she would always have to fight for survival. She thought about the day Wade traced her scars and called her brave, the day her life had changed forever. She thought about all the years that followed, the love and partnership and purpose they had built together. "I did it, Wade," she whispered to the wind. "I kept my promise. I stayed brave. I kept helping people. I kept making the world better." As the sun sank below the red rocks, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Laura closed her eyes and smiled. She could almost feel Wade's hand in hers, could almost hear his voice telling her how much he loved her. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the land she had called home for over 50 years, Laura Garrison Carter passed peacefully from this world into the next. She was buried next to Wade, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their real legacy was not in stone. It was in the refuge that continued to help women for generations. It was in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their values of courage and compassion. It was in the countless lives they had touched and the community they had helped build. And it was in the story that became legend in St. George, the story of the fierce woman with scarred hands and the cowboy who loved her, who traced those scars and called her the bravest woman he knew, and who proved through a lifetime of devotion that real love sees beauty where others see only damage, strength where others see only scars, and forever where others see only the present moment. Their story became a reminder that courage comes in many forms, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that two people who truly see each other can build something that lasts far beyond their own lives. The refuge Laura founded still stands today, a testament to what one woman's determination and one man's unwavering support can accomplish. And on quiet evenings when the sun sets over the red rocks of Utah, some say you can still see them there. The Marshal and his brave wife sitting together on their porch, hands joined, watching the sky turn colors that have no names, loving each other as they always did, forever and always.